Welcome to the Never Been Promoted podcast and YouTube channel. I'm on a mission to help you cut the time to all the things that are holding you back so you can unleash your entrepreneur. Wait, welcome to Never Been Promoted Live. We are doing these live because it's just juicier and more fun, quite honestly, and more things go wrong, which is great because that's what you want in a live broadcast, to make sure all technical issues that could happen do. Great. Just like entrepreneurship, actually, where you think you got it going, you got a plan, and then reality hits and it's something different. So a bit of a metaphor. If this is your first time here, let's be clear what our mission is. So you know it. And if you've been here before, you've heard it many times, so you can zone out for the next 12 seconds. Our mission is to make entrepreneurs better, millions of them. We want more entrepreneurs in the world, and we want them to be better at it. I truly believe that the world, in particular, I think the United States needs more entrepreneurs. I think it's a completely competitive advantage that we have and we should foster. And we do that through learning from the stories of other entrepreneurs, from their successes, their failures, just things they've learned. And if you could do that and learn one or two things from each of our guests, you're doing what's called micro mentoring, and it's a really effective way to kind of pick up things and find the right people you might want to connect with. Today we're joined with Mike Kaeding. He is the CEO of Norhart, and they're like a $200 million construction organization that he has taken from a small business from his parents to a very big one. And he's in some pretty elite groups as well. Runs a podcast. Great hair, actually, too. He's got really nice head of hair. I know that has nothing to do with entrepreneurship, but as a guy that's, starting to thin out a little, you notice the things you aren't. I also notice he has a $200 million business, and I don't, so I'm going to learn a few things. Only call to actions I typically ask is if you like the show, if you could, a little bit, just take a moment, go to youtube.com at Never Been Promoted, subscribe, hit the notifications so you know when we go live or put new content out. And if you're on a podcast listening, Apple, Spotify, what have you, give it a 5-star review if you don't mind. It really helps the guests, the community, on our mission. And if you don't think it's 5-star, you can reach out to me on linkedin.com @in Thomas Helfrich. And if you want to come on the show, it's a great way to get a hold of me. So enough shameless promotion. Get this out of here. Here we go. Mr. Mike, how are you?
Hey, doing good. You might be the first person to comment on my hair, so I appreciate that.
I mean, seriously, you got hair. I mean,
that's what my barber says.
Check
so much
Rogan,
hair.
finasteride, whatever you got to rub in there, just keep it. Okay, it's good. I already told my wife, once the spottiness gets too big, get ready to see some scars from childhood, because it's coming off. We're not doing the dad comb over. It's bad enough already as it is. Thanks for coming on, by the way. You're a well-followed person on LinkedIn. You got a podcast. You've built a business from, you got handed it from your parent. Handed it. I'm sure your parents started it, and you've taken it to like where they were like, oh, I didn't know we could do that. So, thank you, by the way, for so much for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You're up in Minnesota. I think I read that earlier when I was kind of stalking you online a bit.
That's right. The frozen tundra. It's cold half the year, and the other half of the year, it's not that much fun being outside anyway.
Yeah. Are you in the Minneapolis? Where's your area? General Minneapolis area, or are you up further north?
Yeah, we're in the Twin Cities area. That's where most of our properties are. We have some manufacturing capabilities in Wisconsin and international employees all over the world.
Yeah. For a small time, I lived on Lake Calhoun, and this is when I knew I don't like snow at all. Like for any reason, I don't ski. I have no interest in it. I did the ice fishing thing. I thought that was dumb too, because I was like, you just get drunk on ice because you don't actually catch anything. And you're cold. But here's the thing. I knew I never wanted to live in a cold environment when it was like 40 degrees out one day in January, and there's people out in shorts and like light shirts. And I'm like, I'm in a full parka and I'm being asked to move my car because it might snow. And I'm like, no, this is done. We're not doing this. So.
Well, yeah, if you can drive on the lake, something's a little wrong with that climate.
Right. They say up there that the state bird is a mosquito, and I didn't believe them and they also said summer comes in a day. And I was like, nah. So I'm out playing, I think it was Bakersfield National Golf Course. It's got a red barn and I'm playing, and it was supposed to be warmer, and you start off, it's cold and there's still snow on the ground. By like the 10th hole, the snow had melted and I was being attacked by giant mosquitoes. And I was like, holy cow, it really does come in a day. So,
yeah, it's rough out there, but I like it overall. It's not as bad as people make it out to be.
No, that was just reason number 2. Just before we get going and dive into your kind of past a little bit and set up kind of the conversation, I like to kind of break the ice a little. You come from a family business. If you were a ghost, Which of your family members would you haunt and why?
Oh my gosh, that is a great question. Maybe my brother, and not so much because I want to haunt him. I just think he has a really cool job. He's actually a Disney Imagineer that
Oh,
actually helps make the Star Wars attractions and some of the major attractions out there. And I have never really got to sat back and watch them because it's all that super secretive stuff that I can't know about. So I like to be a ghost and just follow him in his job for a while.
I always imagine like we did a tour of Disney. I was hoping like you get to see behind the scenes, and they don't take you to where kind of the characters when they're off go. Because there can only be like kind of one Mickey present anytime or whatever else. But I was imagining like, could you imagine like you go downstairs and the man or woman who's playing Mickey Mouse is just having a nervous breakdown and sobbing in a corner and I'm like, that would be such a I just can't get it anymore. I don't have it.
Or if you had a bunch of Mickey Mouses in one room, it'd be the start of
Right.
some kind of horror
Who's up?
show or
They're all
something.
drunk, smoking. Like,
Yeah. Oh
all
my
right, let's go.
gosh.
Once again, nothing to do with entrepreneurship, but it's still fun to talk about.
Yeah.
Do you want to set this up? So let's have a conversation today about your journey, how your business, how you grew it. Like, but can you kind of just high level talk about what you guys do, and then back up to where it makes sense if kind of how you got there, and then we'll dive in from there.
Yeah, that sounds good. At a high level, we build and manage apartments, but we're really focused on driving down the cost of building those buildings. We've been achieving about a 20 to 30% reduction in those costs, and we believe someday we can achieve a 50% reduction. But imagine what that means. That means someday your rent or your mortgage payment could be half. And that's our dream, is really to solve housing affordability. My parents originally started this business. In fact, I grew up with it. It was very small at the time, but there are pictures of me in cribs on construction sites. I'm not sure that's entirely legal, but that was
Not up to code. OSHA not certified for sure on that one.
not at all. But that was my life, right? In fact, my parents lost everything growing up. And at one point, my dad was actually kidnapped in Peru. But growing up, lived with this business, was out there helping do the work. My summers were tied up in this business. And eventually I went off to college. And the one thing I knew going off to college is that I wanted nothing to do with the family business. And at the heart of that, the reason why is I didn't want people to think it was given to me. So I was really wrestling with my own ego in a lot of ways. But what I realized deep down is that I wanted to make some kind of meaningful, positive impact in the world. And I realized I could take this small business and grow it to something at a much larger scale to have that kind of impact. So I put my ego aside, jumped in, and my dad and we doubled the size of the company in the first couple of years. And then one day, unexpectedly, he passed away. So overnight, I went from having a dad and having a mentor and having this small business with him to not having him and becoming CEO overnight, which was a rough journey, but we've grown a ton since then.
I mean, that's a lot to take on in any moment.
Oh yeah.
Right. Wow. For you. So how, give me frame up maybe age if you can on that one.
Yeah. He passed away when I was about 25.
Oh, wow. Most 25-year-olds could not run a company, not even a solopreneur company effectively. And here you're handed a company that's, you're like, oh, wow. Did you, at that point though, you were already kind of, hey, I think I want to be in the business, or how did the transition back to like, I wanted nothing to do with it? Like what brought you back in to the business?
Yeah, it was really that realization that I want to make a bigger impact. And so it was like logic, right? I could either start with nothing, and there was a few businesses I was exploring starting at that time. I could do that, but going from 0 to 1 takes time, right? And that may take 5 or 10 years to get to a small business stability point. And I just looked at my life and said, dude, life is short. I only got, 50, 60 working years or whatever you want to calculate that in as. And if I can knock 10 years off from that journey to actually having that bigger worldwide impact, why not do that? And so I realized it really wasn't about my ego. I didn't care what people thought about me. It was about what kind of impact can I make in the end, And once I realized that, then the decision became easy to jump in.
Yeah. Did your siblings, brother, did they get involved as well?
Yeah, my brother was involved growing up, but he was so passionate about Disney. We would go to Disney World every year because he was that passionate about it. And he actually entered this big competition with Disney, did incredibly well, became part of their Blue Sky department, and dreamed up all these new rides. So he is living his dream. It's not our business.
And it's warmer for sure,
It's,
wherever
well, California,
wherever
yeah.
he is. Um, all right, so let's get into this a bit. So, you take over a company, so to speak, out of nowhere. You're dealing with the emotions. Your, parents, mom, your parent, all of it, finances. I'm like talking about like the first maybe few months of doing that, like because there are listeners out there that may be inheriting a business, or they may be like, I don't think I want to be anything near my parents' business because I see how hard they struggle. Talk through like what you maybe discovered, had to learn, overcame, the idea of cutting the tie, right? Of what was holding you back that you realized I got to let that go if I'm going to be successful here.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges was self-confidence in some ways. At that time, I was launching a new project, a new apartment building we were going to build, and I had to get through the city council. And the city council already had kind of a uncomfortable feeling about this pipsqueak kid doing construction. And in fact, when we got started, the city staff shut me down twice. And the second time they shut me down, yeah, that's what my staff was out there. People just red taped it. So I couldn't keep working. And the second time they shut me down, they brought me into the city offices. It was one of the worst days of my life. And they sat me down. They said, Mike, we don't think you have what it takes. We don't think you can do this, right? You're too young. You're inexperienced. Your dad's not around anymore. You need to hire someone who can actually do a good job. And so they forced me to hire someone. And that's the worst way to hire someone, is I had 3 days to find someone. Otherwise, my crew would be laid off. We found someone to kind of fill the figurehead role. It was enough to keep the city at bay, but that was a disaster in and of itself. Behind the scenes, we were just fighting as hard as we can, trying to solve things, understand issues, work through everything. And I remember a couple of months before we were supposed to open, we had this water main into the building. It was buried 15 feet in the ground. It was over 1,000 feet long. And the water pressure test on that main failed, meaning that there was a pinhole leak somewhere in this massive water main, and we had no idea where. My excavator wanted nothing more than to leave the site, and I was out there in my fairly nice clothes from morning to dusk every single day with him in the mud, searching for this pinhole water leak. Eventually, we find it and we patch it up. And I remember a few days before we were supposed to open, the city staff came out and did some inspections, and they said, there's no way. You're not opening this building on time. And I looked at them and I said, what am I supposed to do? I have families moving in just 3 days. And we ended up working through the night, every night up until opening. And I remember the last day, it was about a half a dozen city inspectors for a half-day inspection. And they looked at every nook and cranny of that building. At the very end, in the parking garage, I can remember it as if it was yesterday, the head building official pulled me aside and said, Mike, I know we were hard on you, but honestly, looking at this project today, this is the nicest project that we've opened in our city. I was like,
it's nice validation.
Finally. Yeah,
right?
Finally, a moment where I actually feel like I've earned the credit, or I've earned the scars to know that I can actually do this.
Did any history of maybe how your father had run it come into there? Like where maybe I'm not saying he shortcut or anything, but it's construction. So things happen. You find ways to save money. Like were there lingering presumptions the city council members were making about how you'd run the business because how it was run before?
No, my dad always did a good job running it. I think the core issue was there's so many things in construction, and frankly, any business, that you just don't know until you get out there and fail a bunch. And so it turns out there was a certain way they wanted blocks striked on site, which makes sense totally okay with that. But I didn't know, and I didn't know to check for it, right? And so then they start to see me and say, well, okay, if you didn't check for that, are there other things you're not checking for appropriately? So we got a deep, quick lesson in codes and everything related to building, lots of studying, lots of late nights. But we learned it all so that we could do the job effectively.
And during that time, Sue, did you identify then people in your organization that could step up and others that needed to step out?
Yeah. So we had a few key leaders step up during that time in a fantastic way. One that's still with us today. She's phenomenal. She heads up all of our construction. She had, back then it was a small apartment buildings, and today it's $100 million projects that she's overseen. And to see that growth's been incredible. But then, yeah, we had lots of people we had to move out. And one of the most important lessons I've ever learned, and we could touch more on this later if you want, is to hire the very best. When I say the very best, I truly mean the very best. I didn't understand that at that time. And the caliber of people we had working for us at that time, although some of them were great, a lot of them weren't. And so we had to make that change over time.
Yeah. And well, I mean, we can talk about that for sure, because hiring the best sometimes isn't available when you're first on the ramp up to, what you see like kind of a sustainable small business, and as a small business owner as well, that like, we're stable, but like I see it's like a couple things that could crumble, right? And you're like, all right, so we need to kind of take another route. I couldn't afford the best. I can afford good and great, and develop maybe one or two people into being the very best that I think for what we do. But what do you recommend to somebody who doesn't have the financial resources or even time to do that? Like, is good enough at some point? At some point, that person is going to have to get swapped out, or to talk about the journey. Because I agree with you, but I just don't think it's attainable, like for most people, because not everyone can have the best, right?
Yeah, in some ways, you have a choice of either buying quality talent or training quality talent. So there is that element. But I think the really interesting insight that I've learned that I think a lot of business leaders don't, at least I certainly didn't deeply understand. Well, before I give that tidbit, let me mention one thing. And that is, when we hire the best, I truly mean the best. We will fly people in from other states to come work during the week and fly them home on the weekend. We have employees like one of our employees in 2007, Steve Jobs announced the iPhone. Steve Jobs walked off stage, and our employee walked on that same stage following Steve Jobs' announcement. It's that kind of caliber of people. And see, the nugget is this. Most business leaders think they can't afford to hire the best. But when they're doing that calculus, they're considering the cost per person. But the reality is that the best people outperform the average by 2 to 5 to even 10 times as much. They unlock doors for you that you didn't know could be unlocked. They make things happen. They drive revenue. They solve problems that totally change your world. And so when most business leaders think about that cost per employee, I challenge them to think about cost per unit produced, because under that lens, not only can you afford to hire the best, you simply can't afford not to hire the best.
You still have to have the resources to hire them, and because an investment goes like this, and then it returns, hopefully. I guess there's other options though, equity and other pieces, or just different arrangements. But I agree with you. Get the best talent you can get for the investment available through your company, and so I don't disagree with that. I also don't think you should chase perfect. So you got to get the best. If the top 10% are the best, you don't have to look for the 99th. You can pick the 91st, and you can like percentile. Maybe you disagree with that. I just want one. If otherwise you'll be then wasting time having someone who's absolutely plenty best for the position and can be trained.
I think principally you're right, and practically that's kind of a reality of it. But one thing I will say is we've gotten really kind of crazy about that top 1%. And when you start to have a team of that very, very top level, like I've seen what those teams are like now, and I know what they can produce. And once you get a real taste of what that kind of level is like, it's addictive. And so we've been kind of on a journey of that top echelon, but certainly the reality of the world hits you, and you can't always have that perfection.
What do you think has been okay? So when you took over, when you had your father passed, and they're like, not even here's the keys. Let me go find the keys to the like, oh wow, what are these books? What are these other books? Like whatever. My point is, you take over, you kind of sort through it. At that point, how big was the business, maybe from a revenue and employee and footprint standpoint, from like, where you did business, and what's been the biggest, like maybe moments or whatever else to get to where you are today, and kind of describe how much you've grown in the time frame, just to give perspective of what you're talking about here a bit.
Yeah, we probably had about a half a dozen employees at that time. We've scaled now to about 200 employees. Our business was probably valued at, a couple of million, and today we're at, 200 million. That journey has been really tough. It is really hard to scale. That is Elon Musk talks about how it's hard to produce a car, but it's 10 to 100 to 1,000 times harder to build a system that builds cars. And so that's the journey that we've been on. And so for us, the biggest thing has been the most important piece for us has been about finding and attracting the top quality talent. Because once you start building that right talent pool that's able to execute well, that's what's really changed the game for us. We were probably doubling in size every, few years. And then once we realized and it started changing how we thought about talent, that's when we started doubling in size more or less every year. And that in of itself generated new problems and challenges. Like that amount of growth is really hard to execute well on. But it's been a fun journey.
Yeah. What's your advice to anybody kind of in they're sub 1 million? They're like solopreneur trying to get out of being in the business. You're clearly on, the E-Myth, right? You're well into on the business at this point. What do you recommend to that group that's kind of just, they're on their way, but then they're going to hit this plateau? How are they going to take that jump? Or what would I'll assume you're qualified to answer that question.
Yeah. A big thing that I've learned is being thoughtful about how you use your time. There is all the things that are going on in the business right now that feel urgent, you got to do, and you're kind of like reacting to the things that are hitting you as you come along. And there's other sets of things that you may want to do that you think are interesting, and you want to explore that and play with this. And I've gone down that journey. Smart home technology is one example for me. But those things aren't really delivering the results you need for your business. And it's very important that you take time every single week to back up and evaluate where do you want to go and what are the things that will actually help drive you to that point. Because if all you're doing is thinking about the issues that you're faced with on a day-to-day basis, you're not going to get there. You're going to get wherever what random world hits you. And I've seen this with a lot of leaders. And so I think the biggest challenge is stepping back, understanding where you want to go, breaking down the steps to get there, and then taking time to focus on the next step that moves you to that goal.
Yeah, I'll tell you how many entrepreneurs I'll meet and coach to some degree of kind of getting them navigating from that, like let's get you your first 1,000 to first 10,000 to 50,000, just like whatever your service is, because we play in that area a bunch where that's just getting your head around it. That's like the initial cut the tie. I got to hand it off to a much bigger pro after me because I'm like, I don't know. But after that, but the thing is, like, you'll probe in a way like, hey, like, what kind of games do you like? Oh, I love playing this. I'm thinking, stop playing that. Stop playing games. Oh,
well,
I
think you bring up a really good point too, which is the mentors and the coaches are critical, because you have a choice of either failing about yourself and learning through that failure, or bringing someone like yourself on to help actually warn you of the issues you might face and help you down that journey. It's so valuable.
I mean, I tell people, like, listen, I will save you in a month our coaching fees, because you will spend money on tech you don't need, people you're going to hire for sure. You're going to try to do it. Things you're going to try to outsource before there's a process in place. Salespeople, like, the investment is paid off by you saying, don't get that CRM. It ends up being $3,000 a month 2 years from now. You're not going to need that.
Absolutely. For us, one of the big things we do is we literally look for those world experts, and we'll actually bring them in. We'll fly them in to help teach and train us, or we'll use quite a few different coaches and a variety of things. And that's been game changing, right? Like, I
Oh yeah.
don't know everything. I need to bring the people who do to tell me where I'm making a mistake.
Well, 100%. So like, exactly. So like, I know we've met with a couple of our customers. They're in the billion or so revenue side, one software, more on the architectural engineering side. And we do their sales team training of how to use social media correctly, so you're not spammy. And they're in there, and I'm like, hey, so how do you think about social media or LinkedIn? And they're like, oh, I want to get people on a meeting. I want to talk to them about our products. I'm like, no, all backwards. Like, and you don't say call the baby ugly, but sorry, your baby's not ugly, but it's dressed horribly. Like, we got to redo that. And when you bring an expert into something, you see the changes, you see their metrics go up. And it's like, that's a small thing. And when you're talking about like probably bigger things, like, well, listen, if you reorganize how you think about your project management, or if we mix things, or you time it, like, all of a sudden your numbers, your bids get more competitive, your cost comes down. And so in your scale, it's even bigger. Now, you see you've reduced it by 20%. I'll have two questions, but I'm gonna leave it first. How do you think you're gonna get to 50% reduction in cost build, given that labor prices are going up, given that, maybe it's relative to market, but how are you gonna do that?
Yeah. So to better understand it, you may want to understand how we get the first 20% first. But the next step is really about solving 10,000 little problems. There's not like
Or we'll
one.
start the 20%. I think getting the, was it a quick win? It was like, oh, these are no brainers. And then the next, just talk through the whole thing, like, what you saw and how you got there, and what's the future.
Yeah. So at a high level, if you look at other industries like manufacturing, they've improved labor productivity by 760% over the past 60 years. The world of construction has done virtually nothing. So very simply, we said, what did they do well there? And how do we apply it to what we do? And so we talked about coaches earlier. In the world of manufacturing, one of the leaders for driving down costs is Toyota. They invented the world of lean. So we said, why not reach out to them and get their insight and bring their executives in to help us improve what we're doing? So we did that. And so to give you some sense, one of the first things we did was we brought all of the work in-house. See, in the world of construction, you typically have different companies doing different parts of the building. If a construction company were to produce a car, you'd have a different company installing the windshield, a different company installing the door, and a different company installing the wheel. And of course, the wheel company, they would call you up and say, hey, I'm so sorry, I got delayed on another project and I can't get out to your site for another 2 weeks. Your line would be shut down. See, the world of manufacturing looks at us and says, you're crazy. And we respond to them simply with, well, this is the way it's always been done. That's not good enough. So once we brought that.
Just to jump in, when you have to ask that question, when you look at any of your processes, anybody out there, from whoever, no matter what you're doing, if you're doing something and your only answer is, I don't know why we do this, it's just always been done, that is the process to look at for technology, automation, rethinking, restructuring. 100%, like, that is the number one trigger to dump in. So continue. I'm passionate about that. Like, why do we do it? I don't know. Then
absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Another way you can kind of identify those things, Elon Musk has this notion of the idiot index, which is how much cost is a product beyond the raw materials of that product. And when if you do that analysis, you realize, like, holy bleep, there's so much cost above those raw materials. There's a lot of opportunity to reduce the cost.
So I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just think that's such a critical point when you're running a business or you're building one. If you're building a process and you're just doing it because that's how it's always been done, okay, maybe that's if it's a new process, you're starting there, but take off the always been done hat and put on what makes sense better hat. So please continue. It's such an important step for efficiency.
So then one of the things that we did first with Toyota is we brought in a revolutionary technique called the assembly line. I know, crazy, right? Well, how in the world could you take a building and drive it down a line? Well, you can't. But what you can do is you can take the people and move them through the building. So right now, we actually break down an entire apartment building project into about 200 steps. And each team works on one of those steps, and they shift through the building by one unit every 5 hours. So if you look at the end of our building, every 5 hours, we have a brand new apartment unit completed. But that's just one tangible technique. There are literally thousands, tens of thousands of little issues you need to solve. In fact, one of the scorecard metrics that I look at every week with our team is how many new issues do we discover and how many of them have we solved and actually addressed? Because there's no one major silver bullet that will solve it for you. It's a lot of little stuff. So when you think about that, though, at a deeper level, what you realize what you need to do as a business leader is not just solve the problems, but you need to build the team and the capacity and the culture to identify and actually address and solve those problems. And that's really the deeper thing that you need to work on as a leader, is building the right team to solve the problems.
What did you do on the culture side that maybe or how did you morph it from where it was to where it is? In identifying, hey, I like this, don't like that. Did you track? I'm sure it sounds like for sure you're tracking data. There's no question about that. But from the culture side, that's a little, the qualitative sides of things are harder to measure. How did you do it? What were the decisions, and then the impact?
So there's maybe two perspectives of this. If I'm talking pure culture, it's really about supporting the staff and building an environment that they enjoy and want to come to work in. And so we start with what our values are, what our purpose, what our mission is, making sure that has a more meaningful impact in society. And then also making sure that I'm at my core, my heart, that I believe in that and I'm living by that. If you don't have purpose and mission and values that don't align to you as a leader, then they're the wrong purpose, mission, and values. Then we do things like I do literally every orientation. And I lead our new hires through that. We've got videos and there's a whole thing that goes with that. And because I want to share that passion and vision with them directly, we do follow-up orientation where I hear from them how things are actually going. I know I painted this beautiful picture, but is that actually how things are going on site? We pay top of market. We provide Google-like benefits, again, because we need to attract those great people. So that kind of touches on, there's so much more there, but that touches on that part of culture. But the second part of it is you need to build the culture and the capacity to solve problems. And one of the first things Toyota did with me is they came on site and they said, Mike, what are you doing in the job trailer? I'm like, well, I'm working on stuff. I'm trying to get things ready for the team or what have you. I said, no, get out. We're gonna go stand on the site where the framers are framing and you're just gonna stand there for 2 hours and watch them do work. It's like, what? Sounds horrible, right? They're gonna be afraid I'm watching them.
No.
They're gonna think I'm just standing around doing nothing. But we stood there, we watched, and just watching, your eyes are open to all the little issues. And it was that nobody was doing anything wrong, but you start realizing that the systems you have in place are failing your employees. So that was one of the first steps, was me understanding that at a deeper level. But then we also need to get the team involved. And so part of that, the early steps, is listening to them. What problems do you have? And then you just work to solve those problems. Because what you want from them is you want them to know that you're supporting them and addressing the issues at hand. And once they start to see change, and they're like, oh, leadership actually recognized that this was a problem. They fixed it for me, and now it's easier for me. I'm more receptive to having dialogues. And so then we start going through, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Employee, help us do this more. Fix what bugs you. What are those little things in your job that's driving you nuts? And focus on solving just a 1-second problem every single day. And then once you start doing that, you can bring in tools. The very simple one is a production control board. And all we do is a whiteboard with the team, and each one of their steps, or each one of their jobs is maybe broken into 10 different steps. Each one we list a time of which we think they give us a time when they think it can be done. And then they write what time it was actually done. And if it's done late, or frankly, if it's done too early as well, they should write down the issues involved of why that occurred. No blame, just what's the problem? And then once we've started identifying those issues, we need to start asking the 5 whys. So why didn't you get the wall installed in time? Well, it's because my air nailer failed. Okay, why did your air nailer fail? Well, it's because it didn't have pressure. Well, why didn't you have pressure? Well, the pressure tank wasn't working. The pressure system wasn't working. Okay, why was that not working? Well, there was electrical flaw. Well, why was there electrical flaw? Well, because the breaker is faulty. All right. Turns out we actually have to go talk to the electricians to solve a carpenter's problem so they can fix the faulty breaker. So hopefully that gives your listeners a sense of this world that they can go down to improve the processes they have.
You're also describing something that even like I feel like I need a nap just hearing like that. like oh my God, it sounds exhausting. But I think you're describing something you know, when you see people that are successful, what you don't realize is the amount of little things they do that they don't ever talk about. And you're talking about it because that's what you did. And I know in my business, when I really get in the weeds and focus on a problem and just shut out everything, though I hate doing that, it comes out pretty good. And you know, you get pulled in a million directions. And if you have a touch of the entrepreneurial ADD, it's getting like, it's like, you know, you're already on fire and you're always, your brain's throwing gasoline on it all the time. And you're like, I'm just trying to turn off this fire for a minute so I can, you know, anyway, doesn't sound like you have that, or you wouldn't be able to do anything you just described, because I don't even have a couch and I may go take a nap over there. But you're describing something of a point of it's not even grit or resilience. It's about, you know, you want to get as efficient as possible because there's a bigger purpose or mission at hand. You probably could find ways to make more money, but it wouldn't hit your mission. You could probably find ways to hit your mission, but not make more money, like to do it. And the reality is you have to make revenue to be able to hit your mission, because you need those profits to make the investment to go do what you need to go do next. You can't bring in a Toyota assembly line, a consultant, without profits. You can't hire coaches without some kind of investment money that could either come from external or internal. So you have to kind of tether both. But if you didn't have that bigger purpose, or you weren't that kind of person, I think what you're describing would be very difficult to execute in reality with sustainability. I mean, what's your perspective on that very long-winded speech?
No, I couldn't agree more. You know, people often ask me, like, what does it take to get into business and how do you become successful? And I think the core thing isn't even all the techniques and things that we're talking about. It's, are you getting into something that you truly love?
Right.
Because there are going to be so many problems that hit your face, so many failures along the way, that you're going to have every bone in your body screaming to give it up and go sit on that couch. And the only the only way you can get through that is if this is where you want to be, and you have that like inner fire for continuing forward despite all the pain you're going to feel.
Yeah, you're spot on. This is a resilience check. You know, I do some speeches on, you know, the idea of cut the tie, right? Of become an entrepreneur. You know, it's healthier. I think you live longer. Your neurons fire longer. Like, you know, if you're dying in your job, which most people are, like, you know, anyway, the point being is you get out, there's kind of three phases, right? You got this calling. That calling is just, I want to do something more. And then you find the purpose, and those two together get you over the edge to become an entrepreneur. But it's also the fuel and the strength of your chassis, so to speak, that allows you to be resilient to get through. You know, the hard bumps, the things are going to happen. It's inevitable. And it's, here's the chip, guys. It's going to be hourly at times. Just, you're going to have the best, the worst, the best, the worst. And I've had those days where I'm like, holy shit. I mean, how much can I be on top of the world, and the next meeting, 2 meetings down, or an email later, you're like jumping off the top of the roof. Damn it, it's not tall enough. It's not going to do it. You know?
Oh my gosh. It's so true. And for many leaders, you know, I think a lot of us hear that statement and it becomes so commonplace that we kind of almost ignore it until you actually get in it. And then you start to feel what that pain is actually like. And it's like, we've heard all these things. We know it's coming, but once we get in that moment, like just the feeling of that just immense failure, or that desperation, or that I don't know how I'm making payroll next month feeling.
Right.
But it's so important to remember, like, we all go through that. That is normal. That is the journey. And the ones that succeed are the ones that are willing to work through that despite the pain.
100%. You're the idea that you're not alone. is part of the like kind of mission that we're there, that you have to understand when you're doing this, you don't have to be alone, and you should be reaching out to other entrepreneurs that may be in your industry, might be, because they're going to make you feel a little better, but also give you a perspective of navigate, or even just like a pep talk, like, right. Like, getting your time might be more difficult, but somebody who launches a marketing agency should reach out to another one and be like, hey, can I just pick your brain? Most agency owners know that there's so much work in it. Like, and my point is, people will give you time if you sincerely ask. Even you might be like, hey, listen, I'm happy to talk to you for 15, 20 minutes and hear what you have to say. You're very busy. That's always sometimes a waste of time. But if you have a give back of like, I'll mentor people, and this person seems to be in my industry, I might, they might be a best person I might want to hire. Take the time.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Anyone who reaches out in a genuine way, I oftentimes respond very positively to that.
Let's fast, it's conscious of time, right? Like just fast forward a year, and now you're a year ahead. I think it's July 2025 now, and you're looking back. What are you most proud of?
For us, because our costs are so low, we have not had to raise capital in any way. We have bank loans, but beyond that, we haven't had to raise capital. And so we've had essentially infinite IRRs and infinite returns because of it. But over the last year, the capital markets have shifted, and the prevalence of bank loans has gone down. And so we've had to very quickly pivot and learn the world of capital raising at just a massive scale.
It's a full-time job. You can run a business, or you can raise money.
Oh my, yeah.
Tough to do both.
Absolutely. I mean, we've gone as far as like raising international funds, and but we went from having no relationships and no networks in the space to having just a deep set of relationships and networks. So a year from now, I think we'll look back and be most proud of the fact that we've been able to raise a lot of capital in a very challenging market. And that's what I hope we can do, and I'm excited about it.
Is your, I mean, if you can discuss it, is the exit strategy grow a giant ass company and have impact, or is it to exit to like a private equity or a larger, international building?
Well, when we're raising capital, so in our space, it's typically project dependent. So there's a particular apartment building we might build, and then we sell that building, and investors get their capital back. We launched a retail investor product last year, which has been great, which offers a fixed rate of return of up to 10% if you lock in your money between 6 and 24 months. And that has an exit strategy if you just know when you get your money back. And then we manage that all under the hood for you by investing in our different projects and pulling the money back out as needed. At the larger scale, when we're talking, billionaire level investors who are investing no less than $5 million at a time, and oftentimes they're $20, $30 million checks, that's been a totally different world. And for them, they usually lock their money in for like 6 to 8 years, and they get to pull it out upon stabilization of new apartment projects. Is kind of how that fund works. And so each group of investors has a different need, and each product that we have has different characteristics. And we just work to match those two, which can be very challenging, but it's been fun.
Yeah. Well, and also you probably have to reorganize your organization a bit to have an investment vehicle.
Oh yeah.
That de-risks part of your, it's a lot of risk when you start taking in capital, money and, investment, and, it changes the profile of your company significantly. Did you feel though that your profits weren't going to allow you to grow fast enough to get to the state where you wanted to the location of where you wanted to be? I mean, I assume you ran the calculus. Hey, if we kind of stay here, we'll have this kind of more linear growth, or if we take investment, we think we can do this.
So for us in the world of construction, it's very capital intensive, right? I'm talking about $100 million buildings. And so, if we're going to grow and have the kind of impact that we want to have, we either have to have costs that are lower than our bank debt, which in today's market is not realistic because of the low prevalence of bank debt, or we got to bring in a third-party capital. And so, yeah, that was sort of just the calculus. We have to raise that capital in order to scale up to the point that we can have a meaningful impact on housing costs. In the long term, we're hoping to reach a 60,000 unit per year pace. At that kind of level, we're producing so much housing for a given market that we're starting to have an impact on supply and demand. With an abundance of supply of housing, the pricing of housing comes down naturally.
Yeah.
And that's really our dream, is to drive down that housing. But to get to 60,000 units takes a lot of capital.
But maybe just kind of closing out on a couple things here. One, did you pick apartments or continue with that because of, with the last few years of just another boom of housing costs, and there's a whole generation coming up, there's no chance in hell they can afford it, in particular when the rates go up. Jokingly, we always said, not even jokingly, in reality, a month after we bought our house, well, we can't afford it to live here anymore on paper. We're like, well, that was quick. But we got in. But the point is, this group coming out can't possibly buy a house unless it's going to be. So did you pick that because there's going to be there's a demand coming for this, or did you just kind of continue the torch of where your family had started it?
Yeah, the reason we're in apartments and not single family houses is production, because it's, you have to be really laser focused in order to drive down the costs. And if I had a variety of different methods of construction, we couldn't achieve that efficiency. Yep. In fact, there's some billion-dollar companies in recent years that have totally collapsed because they spread themselves too many different production lines in the world of construction. But we're not opposed to moving to single-family houses in the future. But I would say that housing is sort of a ubiquitous market, and that if we can drive down the cost of rentals and apartments, that also has a pressure on driving down the cost of single-family houses as well.
Yeah. Well, I asked that just because I think I'm glad you answered that way, because I assume that's what it was, is this is just about focus, because you've had, an operational, there's two sides. Like I always say, there's two reasons why people buy anything from a service. Is you make the investment in something to drive revenue, and you make an investment to drive down costs. So you bring efficiency experts in to drive down costs, which creates a margin. What are you doing on the other side, though? I'm making a very poor assumption that you have both sides of that strategy running at once. Is the investment the way that you're going to be improving or increasing revenue, or what's the strategy on the other side for driving higher revenue line?
Yeah, so our big focus is driving down cost. On the revenue side, in the world of apartments, it is a somewhat commoditized market. Now, my team would kill me by saying that, because they work really hard to
get a 2x4 thrown at you right now.
Yeah, I mean, they work really hard to differentiate themselves. Honestly, some of our apartments in the top 10 in the state, and they're very high end, very high quality. But then at the end of the day, a customer is looking for a certain quality level, and they're willing to pay a certain price for that. And there's, if we're off price by 5 or 10%, they're not going to rent from us. So, but if we're 5% less, we have all the demand we could ever imagine. So really, the big part for us is driving down that cost, because then we can control the demand by simply setting price to where it maximizes demand for us.
So in your business model, just there's a capitally funded debt service you'll have, I assume you guys put your own money in, a small percentage, raise the rest, and then there's a multiple on the return from everybody. Everyone kind of hits the 8x, 10x multiple, whatever it is, ideally. But then that makes your market incredibly sensitive to a falling interest rate, if I understand the model right? So if you have a raising interest rate, oh shit, we have a problem, because that means your math on the business deal, if you will, is going to be off very quickly. And then if you have rising construction costs, labor costs, that also 6 months out might be 15% more. So how are you? Because maybe I have it wrong, but I think I understand that math a little bit there. How are you dealing with that uncertainty in rates and labor?
You've nailed it. We are very dependent on industry, not just us, the entire market. In fact, with the rise,
sure.
Yeah, the rise in interest rates recently, the number of new apartment starts, so the number of new people starting building construction for apartments, has fallen by 70 or 80% in the past year. It's just collapsed.
Undercapitalized firms are done. They have no chance. Zero.
Yeah. So for us, our strategy to weathering a storm like that, again, is low costs. Because if your costs are substantially lower than everyone else, the numbers can still work for us. But on a more kind of tactical, property level strategy, we can lock in long-term interest rates once we stabilize projects During construction, we can use things like interest rate caps to limit our cost of interest. So we can really manage that risk on a per project level. But still, in the macro scale, when it comes to planning out new projects, there's not a lot that we can do other than keeping our costs low enough so
Yep.
the projects still pencil.
The amazing thing is, right, we'll go through a 7 or 8 year cycle with whatever this is, right? A couple of elections probably. So, not if, when your company pulls to the other side, your investability will take you from probably nearly $1 billion company at that point to 100 billion. Like the amount of capital that when the influx comes back in, and the global market of which, hey, these guys killed it, made people money when no one was making money, when people are going out. I'll assume, poorly once again, probably, your calculus goes, if we weather this and grow in a 5-year period to $1 billion, we're a $100 billion company in the next 5 after that.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. In some ways, like it's been really challenging the past year having to raise all this capital and kind of navigate all these issues. But I look back at it and say, this is maybe one of the most beneficial years of our business. And the reason it is because it's forced us to build
Right.
these networks. It's forced us to get SEC approval and go through the Reg A process and now have investments that investors can invest into. It's how, it's forced us to be on the phone with billionaires on a regular basis, right? And yes, it's hard to raise that capital today, but when that market changes, now I have the relationships to really accelerate growth in the future.
Now, not that billionaires are ever on LinkedIn. If they are, give them a call. Because I always like to do a call to action. I'll assume family office leads. You'd love to meet some people like that. Like, or who is the, is it an accredited investor that would want to, who is it? What you want to kind of at this point? I make lots of bad assumptions, right? Who would you like to get a hold of or get a hold of you, and how do you want them to do that too, for that matter?
Yeah, if people are interested in investing, I would say we've got special programs for investors that are very large. I would say a minimum investment size of 5 million. So I'd love to talk to those folks. But I would say for the everyday investor, we have our platform called Norhart Invest. This is an online platform, very simple and easy to use. You can log in and actually make investments that earn you a fixed rate of return. And you can lock your money between 6 months and 24 months. It's a great way to earn a good, consistent, kind of stable rate of return. And there's a lot of protections we put in place to protect that money. If you want to learn more, visit our website, norhart.com. That's NORHART.com. And there you can reach out to us, and feel free to also contact me on LinkedIn. Any way you want to reach out, I'm open.
So if you got 5 million in your mattress, pull it out. Go talk. I'm not giving investment advice. I'm not regulated to do that by any SEC knowledge. I'm just saying it. If you got it in your mattress, get it out. Like, you should do something with it. Mattress, bad idea. Unless you're a drug dealer, then he probably can find a way to kind of get it in cash, pay for some weird. Anyway, I'm gonna stop. Thank you for coming on today, by the way. I have my final question to you. Is if there was one question I should have asked you and I did not, what was it?
One thing that I've been really wrestling with recently is kind of balance. In the world of entrepreneurship, it is go, go, go. It's, honestly, my weeks are pretty much average 80 hours a week. And there's weeks I can get into 100 or 110 hours. And my daughters right now are aged 4 and 6.
Oh,
I
time for you definitely to
don't,
find some time.
yeah, I don't want to miss this point in their life. So I've been putting a lot more thought and effort and time into focusing on them. For example, this past weekend, going to see Inside Out 2, great movie.
It's on our list, but I'm also very cheap, and we're like, when that shit comes on Prime, we'll watch it together with popcorn. Okay,
there you go.
Like, I will tell you, I will leave this just as a father. I'm 48, got 14, 12, and 9. That age is so precious, and it goes so fast. You absolutely have to find. You got to get it down. Like, your next thing is not 10,000 problems to solve. It's a 40-hour-a-week problem, and I will tell you that priority is going to need to be, okay, I need 20 hours a week with my kids. Now what goes below that? Because I tell you, it is every minute you could have spent with them, go ahead and put it in your guilt bag, because you're going to have a whole luggage set if you don't. So
I agree. That's what's on my heart.
You will not regret any moment of giving up any work time of any sort or any ambition for that time that is only fleeting. for sure. So,
Yeah, I agree. Great advice.
you must do it. If you don't, I'm going to throw a 2x4 at you. Just,
There you go.
call them in, take them out. All right. Mike, thank you. I appreciate it, my man.
Yeah, thanks for
Give me
having
like
me.
1 minute to put you in the, I think I call it the green room. I'm just going to call it, I think it's more of a periwinkle because it's a blue pink mix. It's very nice. It's very pleasant. And then I would never have a car of this color, but a shirt I would for sure. I'll put you back there. There's no gifts or anything else. Just time. Thanks, Mike.
Sounds good.
Hey, for everyone who made it to this point in the show, thank you so much for listening, watching the Never Been Promoted channel. Listen, Mike is brilliant. He's got tons of stuff going on. He's realizing some bigger legacy things with kids. He's building to a $200 million business, looking at $1 billion and beyond. My guess is a book coming, but he better not do it till after he's talked to his kids a little bit more. You hear me, Mike. I know you can hear me in that periwinkle room. Definitely take a moment, guys, to if you're listening to this, please Amazon, Spotify, it takes 2 seconds. Give us the 5-star. Tell us why if they ask you to do that. And just youtube.com at Never Been Promoted. Give us subscribe, follow the button. We got lots more stuff coming, lots more live events, and a lot more content as well. Till we meet again, get out there, cut the tie and get out there and go unleash your entrepreneur. Thank you